This conference will now be recorded.
And I would also like everyone to enter their name and affiliation in the chat box. The chat box should be toward the top right corner of your screen, and it looks like a little conversation bubble. So if you would just put your name and affiliation in the chat box, that'll help us keep an attendance of this meeting. So that said, we will not be going through and doing roundtable introductions like we typically would, just in the interest of time. So with that, I don't think I have anything else to announce at this point. So I will turn the meeting over to our chair, John Eckel, and vice chair, Melissa Green.
Thank you very much, Kari. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Very trying, very unusual times. It's hard for an old dog like myself to get used to this format, but it's still wonderful to hear and see everybody. And I'm so glad that we could get together today. I will tell you, the movie The Shining is taking on a whole new relevance for me. But moving on, I want to first welcome the entire and thank the entire TMACOG staff for all the hard work that they've been doing from home or wherever they can. Certainly Melissa and all the committees for having their meetings in the same fashion and continuing to conduct business in spite of all the troubles that we're going through right now. Once again, thank you for participating. At this time, I would certainly like to thank Mayor Snider and Director Colson for agreeing to be our speakers. Last meeting, if you remember, we went through some of the economic impacts of HABs on Lake Erie and the businesses on the shoreline. We wanted to get a little bit away from talking about all water quality and a little bit more into talking about quality of time on the water. Today, we're going to go over some of the impacts of the high water levels. My wife and I live right on Lake Erie by Davis-Besse, and it certainly has impacted us, and I know it's impacted Port Clinton severely. With that, I would certainly like to hand it over to Melissa to introduce our speakers.
Certainly. Can you hear me? Can I get like a thumbs up? Okay, great. Just echoing kind of what John said, I think it's been really impressive how a lot of us have quickly adjusted to this new work environment, and so far so good. I think a lot of people are saying that the adjustment, though having to have been made swiftly, I think we've all adjusted pretty well and are working in the current environment as well as we can. So I know TMACOG has been doing a great job, and a lot of other organizations I work with as well. So it's been impressive, you know, the way we've been able to kind of adapt to the current situation. So that being said, I will go ahead and introduce our speakers. We're excited to hear from folks from Port Clinton today. And so I will go ahead and give them a quick introduction and then hand it over to them. Our first speaker is Mayor Mike Snider. He is a former city council member. He was appointed to the mayor's position on April 9th, 2019 to fill the vacated term of his predecessor. Ironically, appointment occurred just 2 days before the first of a series of high water related floods that impacted Port Clinton. Mayor Mike was then elected for his first 4-year term in office, a term which began on January 1st, 2020. Mike is very proud of the fact that his family predates the Civil War in the Port Clinton area. As the mayor of Port Clinton is a part-time position in his free time, Mike serves as president of the Ohio State Alumni Club of Ottawa County, Port Clinton area 4th of July festivities chairman, civilian volunteer for the Port Clinton Fire Department, and member of the Port Clinton Kiwanis Club. To pay his bills, Mike is employed as Vice President of Rental Operations for Lake Erie Vacation Rentals Incorporated, which is a Lake Erie Shores and Islands region's largest vacation rental management company, a position which he has held for 25 years. Mayor Mike Snider is joined by Tracy Colston, a lifelong resident of Port Clinton, who serves as the safety service director of the city. He is a lifelong resident of Port Clinton with strong family roots in his community. In the private sector, Tracy is a former sporting goods and sports memorabilia business owner. That love of sports, specifically basketball, has given him the opportunity to share his hoops passion with others as an 8th grade boys basketball coach. In the public sector, Tracy has held multiple positions within the city of Port Clinton, including Director of Parks and Recreation, Cemetery Sexton, Street Department Supervisor, and even an extended stint as Safety Service Director prior to his reappointment to that position in January of this year. So without further ado, again, we welcome them, and I'm going to hand it over to them to talk about the impact of high water in Port Clinton.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. We are in the same room. We are social distance. Tracy's about 5-6 feet away from me, so we'll get started here. I hope everybody is doing well, and we encourage you to come visit us here in Port Clinton now that things are starting to open up. The islands are getting ready to go. Fishing is doing great, so please take some time and come visit us. We're going to spend a few minutes today talking about, as everyone's mentioned, the impact of high water here in the Port Clinton area. And as we do that, we're going to, if you don't know already, tell you where Port Clinton is located in the state of Ohio, give a very brief pictorial history of a certain segment of the Port Clinton shoreline, talk about the 3 major impacted areas along the shoreline, and then discuss some short and long-term remedies and the costs, as the engineers have told us, are going to be affiliated with those corrections. Again, there'll be time for questions at the end. If anybody has any questions as we go through this, please speak up. There won't be any problem whatsoever. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So where is Port Clinton located? If you don't know, we're located in Ottawa County, the county seat of Ottawa County, population of about 6,000, right on the shores of Lake Erie in north central Ohio. A little bit closer photograph here shows Lake Erie to the north, Sandusky Bay to the south, and the Portage River enters our community, flowing in from the west and enters Lake Erie right in our downtown Riverfront area. A brief pictorial history of the Port Clinton shoreline, specifically in the downtown City Beach area. This is one of the earliest maps of the city of Port Clinton that I was able to come up with in doing some research for a project a while back. And for those of you that are familiar with Port Clinton, and you may have visited the Walleye Festival. That takes place right in this area where in this map is shown as Lake Erie. If you keep your eye on where the R is in this map, because this next picture is a photograph taken from that location, or approximately that location, looking back into downtown Port Clinton, the original Port Clinton Lighthouse, the old Lake Hotel. For those of you again familiar with Port Clinton, that's where the Wendy's sits right now. If you were to walk out in that same area right now to turn around and take that picture, you'd be standing at about second base at the softball field that's in Waterworks Park right now. Again, just a little different perspective. This is an elevator. There used to be a grist mill right where the Jet Express parking lot is right now at the intersection of Perry and Monroe Street. This is looking east down Perry, and at this date, Perry Street simply ran from Monroe to Jefferson. So basically where the Jet Express down to the Wendy's, there's the Lake House Hotel. Again, those of you familiar with Port Clinton, McCarthy's Pub and the Island House Hotel right there on Madison Street. Just to give you a perspective, once you hit Jefferson Street, that was then Lake. It's now part of State Route 163, or Perry Street here in Port Clinton. At one point in the late 1800s, the Portage River was diverted. This is the only image that exists from the construction of that breakwall that switched the flow of the Portage River. And ironically, unrelated to flooding issues, the city has been working on creating a boardwalk walkway along the Portage River to reinforce and reinvigorate that area of town. And our crews at the request of the Army Corps of Engineers, had to go out and dig up an existing parking lot to locate this original pier piling as part of the whole construction process. And to put it in perspective, this is obviously the late 1800s. This is what it looks like today. You can see the bend that you saw in the previous picture still exists right in this area. Our floating docks that go in right along the river in this area will be going in next week. But to just give you a perspective on how much has been filled in to the left of that picture, and we'll get into that a little bit more as we move ahead. The True family, which is a very prominent family at the turn of last century, the True mansion still stands at the intersection of Perry and Fulton Street. This is a picture of the True family bathhouse about 3/4 of a mile east of downtown Fort Clinton. And the significance of this, and you'll see this in some subsequent pictures, Perry Street was relocated, and when they moved Perry Street to its current location, this bathhouse is actually right in the middle of one of the lanes of Perry Street. So as you can see, all the water that's right here is now land, and we'll see more examples of that as we move forward. These are some interesting pictures of around the turn of the last century, actually right across the street from my office in downtown Fort Clinton, showing Perry Street has now been extended past the east of Jefferson Street, where we saw earlier, and there's been some fill on the north side in the foreground of the pictures that you see. And actually in the lower right-hand corner, that cannon and the mounting is still there. Again, right across the street, my office is this hotel, and the Wendy's restaurant is there on the right-hand side. So that's, again, standing in the area where the Walleye Festival takes place in Waterworks Park. This is a very interesting picture because it has some ramifications on some things that we're dealing with right now. This is the 4500 block of Perry Street, again, farther east of the downtown, showing Perry Street in its original location with these 2 rows of trees with the road running between it. Just beyond that second row of trees, that's Lake Erie in this area. This kind of muddled image off to the far right is that area where the bathhouse once sat. And if you look at today, the trees are still there, a little bit bigger. The sidewalk is a little in disrepair. Perry Street used to run in this area, now about 60, 70 feet beyond, and then there's another 900 to 1,000 feet going out to Lake Erie. So all of this has been filled in over the years. Farther out on the pier, looking at what it looked like at one point near the mouth of the Portage River, and actually my father remembers, he'll be 75 this year, remembers this looking somewhat like that. So it's only been in the past 50 to 75 years that it's been converted to what you see right now. But what I wanted to point out is right now most of this area is filled. The Port Clinton Yacht Club is on the far right-hand side of the picture, again just showing the evolution of what's happened along our shoreline. Another unique picture going closer to downtown Fort Clinton, still along the river, right where the river makes the bend, where the Jet Express used to dock. The tower in the background, the smokestack in the background is our old water treatment facility. But this image was taken during Prohibition, and you can see that area, you'll see some aerial pictures here in a moment, was used as a dump to put all of the alcohol that was captured. On a side note, these group of young kids over here on the right of the picture, either that one or that one is my great uncle Harvey. They used to go swimming in the river all the time, and there's another story behind that we can tell a little bit later. But that area started to get filled in as a dump, and we're still dealing with some of those issues today. Aerial photograph, again, showing Perry Street in its original location. You still see the bathhouse down there. All of this is water. The city beach is down in this area, although it didn't exist at that time. Portage River coming in, making the curve. You start to see a little bit more fill. The water treatment plant that we saw in that last picture is right in that area. Moving a little bit farther, just again to show that bathhouse is still out there, a little bit more fill. This is a photograph that was taken in the, as you can see, in the late 20s to highlight the brand new lift bridge in Port Clinton, Ohio. That was just rehabbed a couple of years ago, but primarily it's in here to show that there's still a great deal of water in this area. Now we move into the 50s. Perry Street has been moved to its current location. If you look closely in this tree line, you can see where Perry Street used to be. It's now much closer. You're starting to see some of the elements along the shoreline that you would recognize today. There's a ball field out there, the Derby Pond, which was created through a private venture from our fish company that used to have a one-day fishing tournament. The Derby Pond served as host to that, but then you still will see that a lot of what is filled now is still water out in this area. And then moving into, as most current picture I could find, what Waterworks Park and the shoreline in our downtown area looks like today. The city beach down here at this end, this is the area what we call the high ground, where the rides are for the Walleye Festival, the ball field, other elements. Still no lighthouse. I couldn't get an aerial photograph of that, but so be it. The Port Clinton Yacht Club here in the lower right-hand corner. So what you've got an idea of what we've done over the past century and a half to a small segment of our shoreline. But what has Lake Erie done with the high water to the Port Clinton area? And there are three primary areas that are being impacted with specific needs that need to be addressed with each of these areas. And we'll walk through those here as we look at Lakeshore Drive, the city beach, and then our downtown area, which we're calling the Riverfront district. Lakeshore Drive, State Route 163 on the far northwest corner of the city of Port Clinton. Lake Erie to the north, in this picture, it's to the lower left-hand corner. The Portage River to the south, again, upper right-hand corner. And in between there, you've got a strip of land that has a variety of condominiums, marinas, a couple of hotels, restaurants, and one light industry. The area I want to focus on specifically is right here, the berm along the riverfront, or along the lakefront, excuse me. And in that area, you obviously have Lakeshore Drive and Lake Erie to the north. There's a shoulder in there. You have some barrier, which is primarily a mixture of large and small boulders. There's also a pressurized sewer line. And then, of course, utility poles, all within a very, very confined space. How confined? Well, it's a little bit less than the width of a lane of traffic. And it's quite narrow in that space with all those things piled in there. One of our big concerns over the years, we've started to see a great deal of erosion. There used to be a beach to the left on the lake side of those rocks. That's not there anymore. We're starting to see a great deal of soil erosion from wave action. And this is actually what it looks like when we get a wind out of any direction from the north, west to northeast at any sustained amount of time. It causes some chaos and havoc along Lakeshore Drive. Just another image showing the length of that area and the spray and debris that gets washed up onto the roadway. This was taken 2 weeks ago, but we also had the same issue last Friday, where we had snowplows out to remove debris and push the small rocks back in place, and even some bigger rocks got relocated. But the issue isn't always liquid water. We also have some issues in the wintertime with ice shoves along Lakeshore Drive. And it gets to the point sometimes where Lakeshore Drive actually gets covered in ice. If you look closely, you'll see a line of telephone poles. This is actually Lakeshore Drive and the condos here off to the right-hand side. During this particular storm 2 winters ago, a couple of telephone poles got knocked over. We lost a transformer, power got knocked out, and then, of course, we had to call the snowplows out, close down the road. We actually, the fire department was out evacuating some people along the Lakeshore Drive in the condo complexes because we didn't know how far the ice would shove and if there would be issues trying to get people out if there was an emergency down the road. The utility poles we mentioned, we're running out of space to keep these poles upright. And keep in mind, right at the base of all of these utility poles is a pressurized sewer line. If one of these poles should fall towards the lake and not snap as they're intended to, there's a very good chance that it could pixie stick, as we call it, one of the sewer line and rupture that, which has about 3 million gallons of raw sewage a day that flows from Erie Township, which is just to the west of Port Clinton, which includes an industrial park and Camp Perry, a military base. Some of these poles have been relocated, as you can see in the lower left-hand corner. Poles that just simply because they're running out of soil to hold them in place. And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, that utility pole, those support cables in yellow, are actually in the water at the moment. If you were to climb up on the rocks and look straight down, you would see that those anchorages are in the water. Other issues we're dealing with, it's been, engineers' estimates, it's been 70 to 80 years since there's been any major reconstruction of any kind. And of course, technology has changed over that time period. And the theory is that these big rocks are held in place by the smaller rocks. Well, the smaller rocks are getting washed away to the point where in several cases you can see right through them. One of the engineering surveys we had done indicated that there were 28 or 29 spots where the soil has also eroded to the point where it's less than 4 feet from the roadway. And again, in that space, you have utility poles and other utilities. So it's getting to the point where it's critical to get something done. And we'll talk about one of the remedies we're looking at as we move later on. As we look at the city beach, there's actually two areas of concern related to the city beach. And we'll start with the beach itself. This is an aerial photograph taken a couple years ago. This dark line that you see here is actually a decorative brick wall that was put in 20 years ago or so. Just to give you a point of reference, again, the roadway that you see is Perry Street or State Route 163. It's 4 lanes. So if you figure 12 feet per lane, do the math, you calculate how far the beach is. We're looking at anywhere from 60 to 100 feet of beach in this area. Well, one of the storms last year took a wallop out of the sand that's there. These are 2 images, if you will. You kind of have to imagine here, but the one on the left, the sand used to run from just to the left of these trees off in the distance to right down here where that wave is breaking. This was all sand. Again, showing the same thing, but just from the other angle. So all of this sand has been eroded away. Where now that wall that we mentioned is right there, just a few feet from that wall. And not only did we lose the length or the width of the beach, we also lost a great deal in depth. Some places 4 to 5 feet of sand and depth has been eradicated. Kind of funny story. The picture on the right shows these piles of sand. About a mile and a half to the east of the city beach, there's a condo complex, and they called us when all of this stuff started to appear that we were losing the beach, and they said, hey, I don't know how, but we have an abundance of sand all of a sudden. And so they were kind enough to allow our crews to go down there and pick up a couple of dump truck loads of sand, but it's just a just a drop in the bucket of what's needed, but we do certainly appreciate their needs. Actually, another side story, these trees here on the right, they're not even there anymore. The erosion was so great around the root system of those trees that we called in the urban forester from ODNR to have them take a look, because we had some concerns if they were to topple over, they would hit the roadway. And she looked at 3 different clusters of trees, and she said, okay, the ones over there on the distance, they should be okay. We'll have to wait and see with tree cluster number 2, but this tree cluster, that needs to come out immediately. And the conversation was, oh, immediate? Okay, we'll get a crew on it next week. So no, it's 10 o'clock now. I'd expect you have them down by 1 o'clock this afternoon. just because they were in such dire straits of collapsing. So unfortunately, those trees had to be removed to prevent any damage. Just shows another image of the degree of loss of the sand. The walkway that you see here was put in 3-4 years ago as accessible, an accessible pathway for the city beach area. And as you can see from the other three pictures here, only 2.5 of these slabs still remain. All of this has been washed away, and all the sand is gone as well. It just kind of literally fell right into the lake. One of the other areas that we're dealing with is this conduit. Quite frankly, no one alive that works for the city, that has ever worked for the city, knew it was there. You'll see in a minute, there are 3 storm sewer spillways that are on either side of the city beach. And this conduit provides 480 service, 440 service, electrical service to those 3 pump stations. Well, it's been exposed. It's however many years old. It's very, very brittle. It's cracked and open in some spots. So, you know, electricity and water, I hear, don't actually make a good plan. So we've had to rope that area off, close down the city beach, and we're still looking at ways to address this, which we'll get into here in a moment when we talk about remedies and costs. So that's a big concern and a big safety and health hazard for all of us as we move forward here. Some of the things that we've done at the suggestion of engineers and folks from ODNR and others is implemented some beautiful jersey barriers as a wave break, an energy break, to help try to capture some of the sand. And as you can see, that the wall that we talked about earlier, this is the power conduit, and you can see how high the water has gotten. We got it at a low day, got an extra 10 feet of sand out of there. But we've noticed that there is a good amount of sand that's being captured by these jersey barriers, but not nearly enough to bring the beach back to what it should be and what visitors and residents alike expect it to be. Now, I mentioned, you're probably looking, that's a beautiful picture of a wave breaking along the shoreline. I mentioned that Perry Street was relocated back in the 1930s. And I also pointed out at the same time the area of our current city beach. Well, when they relocated and ripped up the old Perry Street, they did as they did back then. They just dumped it right into the lake and covered it up with sand. Well, that 4 and 5 feet of depth of sand and 60, 80 feet of length of sand is gone. And so now we're dealing with the old Perry Street. The debris, some of the iron rebar that was put down, the brick, concrete, asphalt, stone, whatever it was they used to build Perry Street and then tear it up was dumped right in the lake, right where our city beach is. And we're trying to figure out ways to get that out of there, to make it healthy and safe for people to swim once the beach reopens. Now, I mentioned the spillways, and here's an aerial photograph of one of 3 spillways along the shoreline very near to the city beach. And as you can see, there's the pump station and the spillway, and then a little bit of sand at the end of the spillway to allow for the stormwater to flow directly into Lake Erie. Well, with all the storms and high water, here's what we're dealing with now. All of that buffer sand on the lake side of those spillways is gone. We're starting to see a tremendous amount of erosion underneath the spillways. They're still functioning at this point, but there's a tremendous amount of reinforcement work that needs to be done to make sure these spillways will function into the future. And again, we're looking at ways of solving that as well, that we'll get to in a bit. Our Riverfront district, which is probably the most commercial area that we've had flooding issues in. Points of reference would be the Jet Express and the Port Clinton Yacht Club. And the 4 areas, and I'm sorry I only have pictures for 3 of them, but the 4 areas that are being impacted are the North Monroe Street, the curve right by the Jet Express, of course, North Madison Street, North Jefferson Street, and then the Jefferson Street Pier, or some people call it the old parking lot next to the Jet Express. And here's what we deal with almost on a daily basis nowadays. This is North Jefferson Street. The Portage River runs right here, the yacht club in the upper part. And these are just some pictures that we've collected over the years. The one in the lower right was taken from the Great Lakes Popcorn Store from their Facebook page back in July of last year, where they denote that they had to close for business. The Port Clinton Fish Company is in this area. I know that I'm good friends with the owner of that. Last June, in the 30 days of June, he was able to open 13 of them because of the flooding. If this is a picture of Fisherman's Wharf, I would strongly encourage you to like their Facebook page. They have come up with some very funny and creative ways of treating the high water in humorous ways, with frogmen and fishing right from the roof of their house, the roof of their building, and catching fish on North Madison Street. So it's, got to have some humor in this whole thing as well. Just more pictures of that area and the impact of high water. This picture on the right-hand side is from inside of Fisherman's Wharf, looking out to the road, and as you can see, the water, the sandbags didn't help, and all of these businesses get water in them on a regular basis. Again, more pictures of North Madison Street, and I know for some time now there's been the Portage River Kayak Trail discussed. I think we have a solution for Port Clinton's kayak stop. It's going to be right in downtown Port Clinton, easy access to all the restaurants and whatnot. That's right on Madison Street. It's actually on the sidewalk in Madison Street, right outside the popcorn shop. So we're certainly open for negotiations to see if we can relocate our kayak stop to the intersection of Perry and Madison Street in the future. Hope that's not the case, though. Moving over to North Jefferson Street, again, a lot of the same images that you see of high water. This is the area of Subway, the old Jet Express dock is in this area. The picture in the middle here is the inside of Bootlegger's Restaurant, which is right on the river. They opened less than 20 days last year because of the high water issues, just reinforcing what's going on in this area. And then our Riverfront Waterworks Park area, obviously that picnic table on the left shouldn't be feet deep in water. And if you look at the right-hand side, that chair or that table is way out in the distance there, just showing you how rapidly this happens. And it happens not only frequently, but rapidly. You'll drive by and everything's fine, and 10 minutes later, City Hall's getting a phone call that, hey, the water's up, you need to put the barricades back up. We've actually gotten to the point now where we have a pretty good relationship with the businesses down there. They just put them up and take them down as they see the water go up and down. They just call the police department and say, hey, we put the barricades back up. Okay, thank you. Hey, we took the barricades down. Oh, okay, thank you. So it's a shame that we have to do that, but that's the world we live in today. Again, just some more pictures of that Jefferson Street area, showing our municipal docks before they get put in for the season on the other side of these poles over in this area. And then the docks where we keep our police boat. A lot of times the officers can't even get to the police boat because this parking lot is covered in water. Again, it happens on a bright sunny day with very little wind at sometimes. This picture pretty much sums it all up on the flooding issues in Port Clinton. This picture actually made National Geographic last year. It shows the water swirling into one of our storm sewers. The impact to our storm sewer system and our wastewater treatment facility has been tremendous. Our Dave Basak, the head of our wastewater treatment plant, is a superhero as far as I'm concerned. Our plant last year, was it 4 million is normal? 4 to 5 million is normal on a normal day for the city of Port Clinton. We were in excess of 20 million gallons of storm and wastewater treatment last year because of lake water going into our storm sewers, and we've had to expend some dollars to reroute some things. One of the issues, again, we didn't have any pictures that I could locate, but we talked about the intersection of Monroe and Perry Street, which is right by the Jet Express terminal and parking lot. There are several storm sewers in that area that just flow right into the Portage River. Well, as the river would rise, those storm sewers would back up and flood the street. So we had to cap those off, install some pumps. So when it does rain, pump the rainwater out of the storm sewer over the break wall and right into the Portage River. We've had to reroute some things in this area as well to prevent the rainwater, or the river water from backing up. So it's been a learning experience for all of us. So as we look at remedies and costs as we move forward, in the Lakeshore Drive area, in the short term, we're going to continue to snowplow and remove the debris, and even in the summertime. Close the roads from time to time because it's just unsafe to travel, or utility poles have fallen down. And then work with the public utilities, the Ohio Edisons and the Verizons of the world to encourage them to do what they can to reinforce their poles. Unfortunately, the simple answer is they'll just move the poles to the other side of the street. There's no easement on that side because of the limited amount of space. Burying everything is very, very cost prohibitive. We're looking at some options there and money that's out there. In the long run, everyone agrees we need to rebuild that barrier, but coming up with the $3.3 million to rebuild the 3,300 linear feet of barrier to make sure things bad don't happen is the big issue. We've identified some geotechnical dollars available through the Ohio Department of Transportation, primarily used in southern Ohio. Southern Ohio sees flooding along the Portage River, along the Ohio River, much more frequently than we see flooding on Lake Erie on the north end of Ohio. So there are some dollars out there, but they also require some matching funds, and we're still trying to identify ways to, we're trying to identify if Lakeshore Drive and the issues we're facing fits within the parameters of the geotechnical studies and surveys and eventually dollars that'll need to happen. And if so, the next step is then trying to figure out how can we come up with our matching funds to make that a reality. As we look at the city beach, again, the beach remains closed, still under a state of emergency, as is the other two areas that we're talking about. Trying to capture some sand by breaking the wave energy, and then snowplow the sand off of Perry Street and the debris. Waves still crash along Perry Street. Continuously clean up and try to relocate sand back to where it's been removed. On a long-term basis, we need to rebuild those spillways we talked about, replenish the sand, and of course bury that cable. Altogether, that's at about $1.3 million to do that. Bring in the sand, fix those spillways, and bury that cable. Again, $1.3 million again that the city just doesn't have, and at the moment we're not in a position to take out a loan in that amount for a project like this. But we have been able to identify about $100,000 that we can do to bury the cable, encase it in concrete, and move forward there. And actually, there's legislation going to be presented to City Council at tomorrow evening's council meeting for its first reading to allow us to move forward to apply for DEPA grants through Ohio EPA to make that a reality. As we move on to our riverfront, the short-term goals here, or the short-term remedies, are to unfortunately continue to close the streets and install some permanent barricades, as opposed to the barricades the wooden barricades. We've had to install some permanent barricades that just swing open and close to make that process a little easier. Close businesses, clean up. And I gotta go back to that closed businesses. Some of the folks again have become very creative. Some of those fishing charters that you saw are picking up people in four-wheelers and driving them through the water to get to the boat. Or just all sorts of things. Subway, at times you call in your order and they come out wearing hip boots to deliver your food to the intersection where it's dry. So there's folks trying to make the best out of a horrible situation. We mentioned earlier, reroute, block off, redirect some of the storm sewers to prevent the backflow and other issues that are popping up there. And private-public partnerships. I mentioned briefly the businesses in that area are taking it upon themselves to relocate the barricades. We're also talking with them. We had a plan, this is more on the long-term side here, to install an elevated seawall in that area that would both go over private and public land, and we needed their approval to start the process to move forward. And as we looked at that, that's through the Ohio EMA, Ohio Emergency Management Agency. And their approach to flood issues is twofold: elevation or elimination. Elevate the property of the buildings, the structures out of the floodplain so they don't have the flood hazard, or eliminate the structures altogether to eliminate their responsibility with flood insurance. The seawall that we were looking at installing was in excess of $3.5 million. And as EMA evaluates that whole elevation elimination process, it's a cost-benefit analysis. How much have they had to outlay in flood insurance claims versus how much is it going to cost to remedy the situation? And even though you saw the pictures of the flooding and so forth, there haven't been any flood insurance claims, either because the business owners don't have flood insurance because their mortgage is paid off and they felt that it was just an undue expense, or they didn't feel that the increased premiums, had they chosen to file a claim, would be to their benefit in the long run. So because of that skewed cost-benefit analysis, that idea of adding a break wall along the southern shoreline of the Portage River in our downtown area is kind of, unfortunately, a dead project right now, and we're exploring Plan B. And right now, to be honest, we're not really sure what Plan B is. We had a meeting with some folks the other day to look at a more portable break wall, less expensive break wall system, but not sure it's the right remedy for what's needed in our downtown riverfront area. But again, at the same time, we're having to close streets and businesses are having to close. So there is definitely an economic impact at some level. We just need to find a remedy that's cost effective for everyone. So just to recap some of the remedies and costs, we're looking at about $8.1 million total to do everything that's needed to fix the issues in just those three areas in Port Clinton, Ohio. And the city budget is $12.5 million annually. So we can have parks, have fire departments, have police departments, or fix the water issues. Right now, we're also in the early stages. We also know that we have about $130 million of just general infrastructure issues throughout the city: water lines, sewer lines, streets that have been neglected for quite some time. You mentioned parts of Lakeshore Drive, and that seawall barrier is in excess of 80 years old. We still have some water lines that are at least 80 years old. We're in the early stages. Council is going to take some action tomorrow. We need to get the ball rolling on addressing hopefully $20 million of that $130 million generalized need for this general infrastructure for the city of Port Clinton, to get that ball rolling, and perhaps we can roll some of those funds into addressing some of the matching dollars and other issues that are needed in our flood zone areas. And of course, the big unknown is, what is COVID-19 and how is it going to impact that $12.5 million city budget? So travel and tourism is impacted tremendously. We've got bed tax that's collected every time a guest stays in the city of Port Clinton at a hotel, condo, B&B. How's that going to be impacted? Of course, tax revenues. Everyone's laid off right now. Businesses are starting to kick back up, but we've missed a good chunk of our summer season. And what is our summer season going to be like around here? So those are all questions that still need to be answered and may have impact not only locally, but at a state level. Are the dollars that we're looking to draw down from these various entities going to be available as we move forward and try to address some of these issues down the road. I neglected to mention along Lakeshore Drive, even if they were to say, hey, there's funds available to fix that barrier, and we'll fund it 100%. If they were to say that today, we're still looking at 2024 before we see any of those dollars flowing into the city to help address that. So we're still, 4+ years out to get any money to get that going. And we just we pray that we've got 4 years of erosion and remedies left to make it that far. So with that, I will open it up to any questions if anyone has it. Now, at the moment, I can't see any of you. I can just see my PowerPoint presentation. So just holler and we'll go from there. And yes, I'm going to take off my mask to drink water. Anybody got a question? That was such a thorough presentation. Wow. Wow. Hey, ask something so he talks. Come on, do something.
Thank you, Mayor Snider and Tracy. That was a fantastic overview. And thank you also for the history. At some point, I did mute everyone's speakers, but those of you who hadn't muted yourself, be unmuted now. If anyone has questions for our speakers, go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Hey, Mayor and Tracy. This is Sarah Helbig from Jones & Henry Engineers. Hopefully you can hear me. I did join just a couple minutes late because I had a hard time getting in at first. I was just curious, within your general infrastructure priorities, you mentioned some of the older water lines. What are some of your other big barriers that, outside of the flooding, are ongoing needs that you guys need to tackle?
It's the water lines, sewer lines, streetscapes. As we said, Pogemeyer Design Group has provided us with a overlying study that's been a comprehensive plan that looked into a street study that was done a couple of years ago, water line study, sewer line study, put that all into one report to get us at that $130 million estimate in today's dollars. It's all the above. We've gone through a couple of years now of streetscapes, sewer lines, water lines, rehab in our downtown area, and on a couple of occasions have come across active wooden water lines in our downtown area. We know there are other parts of our community that have active wooden water lines. We can't fill our water tower right now to capacity because if we do, the pressure it puts on our aging water lines will rupture those water lines. So we are one of a few communities that anybody has come across in the state of Ohio that doesn't have a long-term plan that we're trying to address right now to address these aging infrastructure issues. Don't ask me why it was never done in the past, but it hasn't been, and we're trying to deal with that now.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is,
Mayor,
Craig
I think I
Everett
may have
goes
muted.
away, Mayor. You're not the only one that does not have that long-term community plan. We have the same issue. We're developing one right now. We have aging clay tiles that are breaking up. But it all drains, our village all drains to a county maintenance ditch, which now with the increase of the agricultural production and more drain tiles going into it, and the 1% slope, their village drainage ditch often exceeds capacity, and our lower end of our town is constantly underwater. And so, as I listen to the Port Clinton's issues of what they're running into, I'm going, oh my gosh, same thing happened in the village of Wayne. They're dealing with the lake, we're dealing with the county maintenance ditch. but their issues are very, very similar, trying to find the money, trying to find the grants as the best way to go out to solve the problem. So and it sounds like drainage is a pretty important issue across the board for many of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would say if there are any other questions for Mayor Snider, feel free to enter them in the chat box, and we will come back to them at the end of the meeting if anyone has submitted any. Thank you, Mayor Snider. Thank you, Tracy.
Well, folks, you're very, very welcome. You're very welcome. And I know I need to return control of this back to you. Refresh my memory.
I will go ahead and take control back.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone.
Are we back live, Kari?
Yes, we are. Go ahead, John.
Oh, thank you. Mike and Tracy, thank you so much. I've been downtown. We've been here since '07 on Lake Erie, and you're our adopted new town along with Oak Harbor, and my heart goes out to all the problems you're having. We have them here, cottages on the lakefront flooding, and you know, there's not enough riprap and protection to stop it. And we flood on a regular basis and have storm pumps, but it's hard to pump water into something that's higher than you are. So been there, and my heartfelt concern goes out to Port Clinton. With that, I guess, Kari, we are down to the staff report.
Okay, thank you, John. And thanks everyone for joining the call today. I know we had a few folks join late, I think because of some connection issues on the TMACOG website. So my apologies. I think we may have had some incorrect information up on the calendar. If you are just joining, or if you haven't already, would you please put your name and affiliation into the chat box? This is how we're keeping track of attendance today. So on to the staff report. I wanted to mention that we are in the process of hiring a new staff member to take over the position that Chris Barneswell left back in December. Chris was working on the area-wide water quality management plan, or the 208 plan, and he was also working with our water and wastewater committees. So we will have a new staff person starting on Monday, the 18th of this month, and his name is Matt Kennedy. I believe he might be on the call today. I'll give you a second to unmute yourself, Matt, if you are on the call, and if you'd like to just say hello to everybody.
Yeah, I did make it in. So thanks for that introduction, and I'm really looking forward to working here in a little bit.
Great, thank you, Matt. I'll also mention that Matt just defended his thesis down at Bowling Green State University, so hopefully we'll get to, over the next few months or so, hear a little bit about the research he was doing in Tim Davis's lab. So more to come. Welcome, Matt. I'll also mention that TMACOG staff are working with our committees right now to update the agenda for Lake Erie. This is our water quality policy document that we use to engage local, state, and federal legislators in water quality policies. So we've met with, I believe, 3 of our committees already, and we still have some more committee meetings coming up this week and into June. We will then take all of the feedback from our committees and incorporate that feedback into an update, which we will then also present to some stakeholders in the region. Once we get stakeholder input, we will bring it back to Water Quality Council at our next meeting that is currently scheduled for July 13th, I believe. At this point, it looks like that will likely be a web-based meeting, but we will keep everybody posted on that meeting information. Finally, we are working on a water and wastewater operator workshop. We had initially intended to hold our annual workshop at the United Way building in Toledo. As you know, we are not going to be getting together in any large groups anytime soon. So thanks to a sponsorship from Jones and Henry, we are able to purchase some webinar software. So we'll be able to continue offering our operator credits and operator educational opportunities this year. So I'd like to say thanks to Sarah Helbig, who is on the line from Jones and Henry. She helped to facilitate that sponsorship, and we'll be working with her to put together some other interesting programming for that workshop as well. And with that, well, I will also mention that TMACOG staff are working from home right now, and we will be at least through May. After May, we will likely be transitioning back into the office on a very limited basis. But all of our committee meetings will be, I guess, canceled or held online until further notice. So we're communicating mainly through email. So if you just keep an eye on your email, you'll have the latest information on all of our committee meetings. But like I said, we're all working from home and available through email. So please reach out to us at any time if there's anything we can do. And John, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Kari. Do we have any public comments today?
Yeah, John. Hey, Captain Dave's here. I'm on the phone. I got in late. I just wanted to pass on that April was probably the absolute best April I've ever seen out on the lake. First of all, we are able to go at least 18 times during the month of April, which is usually, normally it's 6 maybe instead of 18. So the weather cooperated, and definitely the fish sure are. All of the charters will be able to start fishing for real starting tomorrow. And this past Friday, the DNR opened up for the folks for out of state to get their licenses. So from a fishing aspect, things are moving forward.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I think you can, we can both admit we've probably seen each other most of those 18 days out there, and I will certainly reflect it has been incredible. Do we have any other public comments? All right, with that, I will remind everybody that our next Water Quality Council meeting is July 13th. I strongly would guess it'll be the same type of format. Kari, do you have anything else from the staff?
No, John, I think we've covered it. I will say that this meeting has been recorded, and there was so much great information in Mayor Snider's presentation that I will be looking into how to get this up online. So if anyone would like to go back and look at any additional details, you can do that.
No, thank you, Kari. I know for one, I'd like to see those pictures on a little bigger screen than my iPhone. But with that, I guess we can wrap this. We'll adjourn. And once again, I miss all of you. I can't wait for the day when we can all return to normal, whenever that will be. I'm glad that we're all being careful. I'm glad that some things are opening up, as Dave said. Our economy out here on the lake strongly relies on charter fishing. But with that, I wish you all the best and look forward to the next time we can see each other.